Hello and welcome to Stowe Talks, a podcast designed to support people going through a relationship breakdown and all the challenges this brings. I'm Matthew Taylor.
And I'm Liza, family lawyers at Stowe Family Law. And today we are joined by special guest Rosie Lyon as we look at the impact of economic abuse and what help and support is out there for survivors. Thank you so much, Rosie, for joining us today. Could you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into supporting survivors?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for having me today. So, my name's Rosie Lyon. I'm 27 years old and I'm based in Essex in the UK. I currently work in the banking industry. So, I'm an executive assistant to two heads of the bank. And I do a variety of other things on top of my day job, including doing anti-money laundering reviews, account opening. I also look after our vulnerability and conduct team in regards to domestic abuse, putting things into place for our customers, as well as supporting HR for our staff to make sure they're supported during domestic abuse. The main thing that is why I come into domestic abuse is from my own personal story of experiencing it for around 10 years now. And I realised there was a change that needed to be brought in the financial industry. And I decided to start the challenge of changing it. So that's how it all began.
So, do you want to talk us through a little bit about what it was that you've been through? Because you're 27, 10 years is a huge amount of time to be experiencing what you've gone through. So, can you shed a bit of light on what, before we talk about economic abuse in sort of wider terms, what it means to you on a personal basis?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So when I was 17 years old, I got into a relationship. I was with that individual for 7.5 years. I didn't realise there was any sort of emotional financial abuse until it was too late. I just thought it was a normal relationship. It was my first ever proper relationship, so I didn't know any different. At the age of 22, I got a joint mortgage property with the individual because it's very hard to get a mortgage property on your own. And that was something I really wanted to achieve in life, was to have my own mortgage. And I was able to do that at 22, and I was just over the moon with that. But by June 2019, I decided the relationship wasn't for me. So just over the 7 to 7.5 years. So ended the relationship. It was actually quite amicable the way it finished, which I was quite shocked at. But all good. But then unfortunately by August 2019, I had to move out the joint mortgage property just because of emotional abuse that was taking place, a lot of disagreements, arguments. And I thought it was just because that individual was taking the breakup badly. And then, I was paying the mortgage in full and the bills out of my account. And there was a lack of payment from the other party. So by October of 2019, I approached the topic. I was trying to get the property up on the market, but obviously as it was joint, I needed a joint sign off for that, which I wasn't getting. And then, it was brought up in October. Then unfortunately it did become physical. I had to call the police, and then we go down this route of that, I had to get a non-molestation order out, which was then breached, that got charged, and a restraining order was put into place. So lots of different things that, happened in such a short period of time after that breakup, and what they call more post-separation abuse. And then in January of 2020, I hired a solicitor. It was a high street solicitor, so one local to me, and they were quite cheap. And at the time, I was paying this full mortgage and full bills by myself without actually being able to physically go into the property. So, it was, cheap as possible. And he was doing the letter writing for me. There wasn't much understanding on domestic abuse or anything like that, but, he did the job with writing the letters for me. And he used to always send me the letters that I received back before he decided to write back. And we were just trying to get the other party to sell the property. So we tried everything, any sort of idea. In the end, I did offer to do all the sale, and I will give the individual all the equity of the property, so I'd leave with nothing. I just wanted this property done and over with so I could move on with my life. But unfortunately, that individual wasn't going to play ball. So I had to then make a decision in September of 2020. I did stop paying all the bills because my solicitor advised me. Again, at the time, I wasn't aware because I was on the land registry of the property. I just presumed I had to have all the bills in my name. So I did stop paying that. But the mortgage, I paid that all in full. And obviously, when the police got involved, I got very little payment after that. So I was paying it all on my own. And the solicitor did keep a running total of the costs and how much was owed for me, which was quite helpful as well. So my options were to either, well, this is what I was advised at the time, was to go to court to get the court to force the sale, which obviously means that I can sell without his permission, without his consent. But I was told that it would probably cost me around £15,000 if it runs smoothly. I'd already spent so much money and I didn't have £15,000 just to do that. And I knew it wasn't going to go smoothly. Or the other option was to stop paying my mortgage. That was really difficult for me because obviously I work in the financial sector, and when you get a job in banking, for instance, they always do a credit referencing check in the UK, and I knew it was going to ruin my credit scoring, and I was a bit like, what if my bank had made me redundant? Would I never be in a job in the financial sector ever again because my credit is going to be so poor? But I had to outweigh the pros and the cons, and I decided to stop paying the mortgage. So I did that in September 2020. I, let the mortgage company know. They knew what was going on throughout the whole time. I'd let them know, and I just knew to let them know from my banking experience. And yeah, so it went into, started going down the repossession route. I did, it was a really difficult time for me, and I was treated very poorly by my high street bank, which was the mortgage provider, and that's where all the work comes into place. And what I'm up to now is that it took them until June 22 to repossess the property, so that's a very long period of time. And if you think about that, the credit scoring each month, the missed payments, the interest on top of that. So it's in tatters. It's been repossessed, and it's up on the market. It has been for a little while now, but that's one step closer for my story, or this chapter of my life, finalising. So I'm very much looking forward to it to being completed.
And during that time, your ex-partner was still living in the property. So, from the period where you were paying the bills, and then afterwards, when you'd stopped paying the mortgage, they were there for that entire period, kind of living the life of Riley a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I can't confirm or deny, because of course I wasn't allowed, the police advised me not to go back to that property. I went back to it in January of 2020 to collect my stuff, because there was a separate matter of going into my laptop. I'd left my laptop there. I'd left a lot of my stuff there when I left. But going into my laptop, going through my stalking my social media, and which was another police matter at the time. So I did get police escorted there, and as far as I was aware, and from looking at it, there was someone still living there. But then other than that, it's just, Chinese whispers. I live in a small town. So it would be anybody would mention it to me. Not that I'm interested on what that individual's doing. But as far as I was aware, yes. And as far as the High Street Bank was aware, yes, also.
What impact has that had on your credit rating now? I mean, I assume your ability now to borrow, to get another mortgage, and we are doing this talk on the day after a lot of the banks withdrawing mortgage products from the market as a result of what's going on politically. So, it's a very topical conversation in terms of the ability to get mortgage. But what impact has all that behaviour had on your future ability to borrow?
Yeah, it's a very difficult time for me. It has been throughout the whole situation. So in regards to my credit scoring, I've had really good support from credit referencing agencies like Equifax. I do a lot of work with them, which we may touch on a little bit later. But so they've been really supportive with making sure I can get access to my credit scoring. I keep an eye on that as well. But obviously, because this has been going on for a long period of time, the first missed payment would have been October 2020. And it's it's still ongoing, from up to June 2022, because that's when it was repossessed. Obviously, my credit scoring goes down every single time. So currently at the moment, with my credit scoring being absolutely rubbish, I can't get a phone contract out in my own name. I can't get a loan, a credit card. I can't get a mortgage. I can't get finance for a car. You know, in the area that I live, and from the research that I've done as well, I can't rent privately. In some cases, the estate agents don't want to know because I've got bad credit due to a repossession. And then, you know, also with that, in regards to the property side, because I have a full-time job and I earn a half decent salary, I can't get council help, so they won't house me either unless I'm homeless. So really and truly, like I'm sure hundreds or thousands of people, I'm stuck with what I can do and can only support on family and friends that are around me.
So, I mean, we talk a lot about domestic abuse being an umbrella term. So, financial abuse is obviously one part of that. For people that are listening, what does that mean? So, you've given kind of an example of how that's impacted on you, but what other actions could fall within that term?
Yeah, so you have financial abuse, which is umbrella of economic abuse, very similar what they're defined as. But there's so many ways and different things of financial abuse, and quite a lot of the myths with financial abuse is very much like, you know, it's the woman that suffers it, and of course this could happen to all genders. But it's the woman that suffers it, and then, you know, they've been told that they're not allowed to work, and that they're not allowed to have their own bank account, and, you know, which is probably the case with some circumstances, but it's not always the case. So there is stuff like not being able to have access to your own bank account, having even like statements hidden from you, so that other party in the relationship manages the finances, you have no sight of it. That could be very dangerous because, of course, they could be getting loans out, credit cards in your name, maxing credit cards out, different things like that. And then it's just about it could be limiting someone. So like me, it's now limited that I can't get a property or any sort of loans or finance. So that's had an after effect on me. There's so many different varieties of financial abuse, but really and truly it's all about taking away that financial independence from somebody, whether it's via money or because you've now decided to stop paying something and now you've given them a poor credit scoring, which will impact them for a good decade of their life.
Are there any kind of common telltale signs that people can watch out for that might suggest that heading down a path towards an economically abusive relationship? Because with most forms of domestic abuse, it rarely goes from 0 to 100 overnight. It's quite a gradual process a lot of the time, and people, and you sort of alluded to at the start, you thought it was a normal relationship, you were saying. You know, are there some sort of common telltale signs of survivors that you work with where you look back and see, oh, this is something that we consider a bit of a red flag?
Yeah, so there's every person's story is different but similar in so many ways. So there's so many red flags, and some of these red flags obviously doesn't necessarily mean it has to be financial abuse. So for instance, one of the red flags for me would be that individual like gets out loans in your names and stuff like that without your consent. Then obviously that's a massive red flag. Or they coerce you into getting loans out in your name to help fund something that they want to do. Again, that's a red flag. But other red flags, like in my situation, would be someone that doesn't want to save money or would rather spend it on other things than contribute to the property and the bills. Again, you know, sometimes that is a red flag in this case. So my case was because he wanted to spend that money on himself or, you know, drugs, whatever else it was. But you know, in other relationships, it might be that someone's just bad with money, and they, you know, and they just spend their money. So, you know, it's very difficult in times. But there's so many sort of like there's charities out there and stuff like that, you know, specialise in this properly, that have certain red flags that they do in sort of training sessions.
You know, how have you taken your experience, and how do you specifically help victims?
Yeah, no, so basically in around February of 21, I'd been treated extremely poorly by this high street bank and still had for continuing on up until date. I decided that something should be done about this as well. I didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through. So I'd reached out to the high street banks, saw if they had a domestic abuse policy. At the time, they didn't. I then went to my own bank that I work for and asked if they did, and they didn't. So I was like, that's what I want to do. And as I was thinking of putting domestic abuse policies into place or influencing people to, there was a competition that started being advertised in around March of 2021, which was Young Banker of the Year, which was a worldwide competition hosted by the Chartered Banker Institute. And, you know, for me, I don't have a university degree. I've been in banking for 6.5 years. However, I don't like banking jargon, anything technical. It's not for me whatsoever. So I was a bit umming and ahhing whether to go into this, as well as I had severe anxiety. I couldn't even leave my front door. So I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But I decided to take the plunge. And after about 500 drafts of the first submission, I actually, I submitted it. And it all came from this idea of the policies, and it actually grew. So my idea ended up being a fairer financial future for sufferers and survivors of domestic abuse. It was made up of 4 points. So 1 was raising awareness, 2, implementing training, 3, enhancing policies and procedures, and 4, obtaining lending opportunities for those with poor credit due to no fault of their own. And I was so determined to put this idea into place. I started reaching out to different banks, different charities, different organisations to get their feedback. Did they think it was a good idea? Would they support my idea? You know, different things like that. And as I was doing that, I started progressing through this competition, surprisingly, because I didn't think it would get anywhere. As in banking, domestic abuse wasn't really spoken about too much. From what I'd seen as well. I hadn't seen it advertised anywhere. And when I did research, I think there was only 1 bank at the time that had financial abuse on their website. So, you know, it was something that really needed to be done. And then by October of 21, it was the final. I was the only female in the worldwide final. I'd done talks to the FCA, UK Finance, Innovate Finance, HM Treasury. You know, there was loads of different charities. So many people were on board with this idea. I'd gone viral on LinkedIn as well. And I ended up winning that competition. So I hold the worldwide title and first UK female too.
Amazing.
So what I do now, and I continue to do, is obviously implement my idea, such as raising awareness, sharing my story across different banks, different organisations, anybody that wants to hear my story. I implement training. I help and encourage people to partner with surviving economic abuse. So economic abuse, it solely focuses on that. And so they partner with different banks to do training. So the banks that I work for do that, and lots of the high street banks do, which is amazing. I brought out a domestic abuse policy in my work. It's one of the first ones in Ireland. And now, from talking to the Irish Culture Board and a variety of different things in Ireland, now by banking law as such, they have to be trained on financial abuse. All banks do, which is amazing. I help put in different procedures, like so how to split joint bank accounts, opening accounts without ID and proof of address. And then obviously the lending idea, I partner with Equifax Credit Referencing Agency. They've been absolutely amazing, and we've worked on an idea that would work to enable people to get lending if they have the income and expenditure to do so, rather than just looking at a poor credit scoring. It was sort of piloted on myself and my data, and it was successful that I'd be able to get lending. So I'm now getting that put into place into my bank. We're going through all the relevant steps. And also I'm influencing different high street banks that are really interested in the idea. I think I've got 3 at the moment that are interested in implementing the idea as well. So, and a lot of other things as well, like property, looking at onboarding for individuals that want to go into the financial institutions that have poor credit and different things like that. It's never ending.
It sounds it. I mean, that's a phenomenal achievement with the award and the amount that you've managed to accomplish. It sounds to me, I was really interested as to what the reaction from the industry was, because it sounds like, and you make it sound very easy, and I'm sure it wasn't. You're sure you must have worked incredibly hard. What was the initial reaction when you're speaking to these huge banks and saying, look, you need to consider economic abuse? Did they need some persuading? Did they have any awareness at all about it?
So all different talks and different institutions I've spoken to, before I'd gone into this competition, so as I said, the competition went live in, I think, March of 21. I'd thought of just the policy part of the idea in Feb 21. And when I was approaching people, it was very much like, we don't have a domestic abuse policy, which didn't surprise me at all. But it was very much like, it's not by law, you don't need to put a domestic abuse policy in place, but it's just good practice too. So a lot of industries didn't want to put them in place because, budgets and different things like that, and because it wasn't by law, which for me wasn't good enough. So that was sort of like pushback that I had. But, I'm hats off to the Chartered Banker Institute for the competition, because as soon as I got through to that semi-final, everybody was on board. I haven't had any pushback from anybody. I've had a lot of different organisations that may not have domestic abuse on their radar, so they have to factor it into their plan. And ones that I've done talks to, for instance, this year, will be factoring it into their plan next year, and I'll be assisting them with that. So it's really important because there's so many vulnerabilities out there, but domestic abuse is on the high and continues to be so, especially in regards of economic and financial abuse.
Yeah, I'm really surprised actually that they didn't have any domestic abuse policies. I kind of understand, as I say, it's a big umbrella term, and perhaps, they hadn't specified a policy for economic abuse or financial abuse, but you would expect there to have been some sort of domestic abuse policy in place. I'm also quite intrigued. So you said that during your own story, your bank hadn't been particularly great. Are they now working with you with regards to these policies? Are you seeing a change in them?
Yeah, I mean, they're absolutely amazing. I can't fault the bank I work for now. They're so good. They're so supportive. Anything that I come up with, any ideas, initiatives, they're on board straight away. When I was going through the competition, and part of it was the policy idea, there was a lady in HR that took over from, because obviously the people that I'd had poor experiences with in my bank, they'd left. So, I think it does still depend. It's not right, but it does depend on the individual that you get at the time. And I think that's the same for any organisation. So when I wanted to put this domestic abuse policy in place, I was fully involved in it, and they turned this policy around within 3 months, which is quite good for banks because it goes.
Yeah, that's rapid.
Yeah, that is very, very rapid. And I was it was there and it was live just before the final of the competition as well. And, and in this policy now, we do share our policy. I get obviously relevant sign off to share it with other banks, with credit referencing agencies, anybody that wants to put similar one in place, because ours is very much, what domestic abuse is, the different types of abuse, the myths, and what we can do to support staff. So obviously back in the day in 2019, when I first disclosed domestic abuse, when it had become physical, because again, the myth that I didn't even know what domestic abuse was until it had become physical, and I got support and someone actually explained it to me. The management that I had at the time, not my manager obviously anymore, and not something that would be tolerated, was very much, don't burden people with your problems and just book annual leave if you have to go to the police or court. Again, not good enough. So now in our policy, we give staff 10 days extra annual leave, flexible working. And we're also at the moment tweaking it with our security team to look at measures that we can do with our security team, who are ex-Gardaí, aka ex-police in the UK, and how they can support staff, maybe assisting them by escorting them to court, to police interviews, giving them support. And our security team are brilliant, and they've been brilliant with me actually as well. So hats off to them. But yeah, there's been a big change, massive change.
Well, it sounds like it was certainly needed, that kind of sea change. Moving on to kind of individuals who are listening to this, who might be thinking, "Eek, I recognise some of those red flags. I feel like it's an economically abusive relationship," or someone is listening and feeling like a friend or family member is experiencing that. What advice can you offer to those people?
Yeah, I think first things first is, if you are going through this, or realise from listening to this that you are going through something similar, is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I start with saying that because, I'm quite, with my anxiety, I'm quite a negative. I can be very negative minded, fortune telling of my mind by saying it's all going to be negative and go to rubbish. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, I promise. Like, if you'd said to me back in 2019, when this first really and truly come to light, that I'd be changing an industry, doing all these talks and doing everything that I do, I'd be like, absolutely not. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. If family and friends think that someone's going through this, it's a very difficult time for them as well, because I've seen how much it's impacted my family, my friends, when I've been going through this. It's been awful. But just making sure that you listen, even if you don't fully understand, because again, you won't fully understand unless you've been through it yourself. But just listen and don't push your opinions or your suggestions. We're all, very open to suggestions if they're going to be helpful. But over my time, I've had many suggestions and opinions from other people which could be quite damaging going forward with the decisions that I make. I'd also say to reach out to different charities as well. So like there's Refuge, the domestic abuse charity, that's 24/7, that's for women and children. There's Mankind Initiative, which is a male version. There's other ones, but these ones I've done work with or, spoken to, and they do amazing work. There is a money support line as well that is partnered with Surviving Economic Abuse. That can be found on their website. That's a really good line to ring if you've got any concerns about debt or financial abuse, anything like that, and they can give you guidance, which is great. Surviving Economic Abuse as well, even though it's not a first line sort of charity that you can contact, they have so many resources on their website as well that will help. And I do think if you are experiencing similar to what I am or any other sort of financial and economic abuse, open up to your bank, because people kind of forget, and I think there has been a lack of trust in banks of getting things done. Okay, like I was treated really poorly by my high street bank, but they've come a long way especially since my competition. There's a financial abuse code which you can go online. It's on UK Finance's website, and certain banks have signed up to it, and there's pledges to do more on financial and economic abuse. So if your bank's on there, that they have a duty of, well, all banks have a duty of care, but these ones will specialise in looking after people that go through domestic abuse. If you're treated poorly by the bank or don't get the outcome that you want, I would suggest complaining, because at the end of the day, this is your livelihood, and you need to make sure, it's what's right for you. If you're not happy with their response, like if in anything with banking, if you're not happy with any response a banker gives you, then do complain, because then they learn from their mistakes. There's so many different things now, especially in the high street banks. Obviously, I don't work for a high street bank, but the high street ones especially, they have got a lot of things in place, and obviously they're such a larger bank compared to the one that I work for. But yeah, some of them are doing really good work.
And what about, you talked about your family lawyer who you worked with, and letters were going backwards and forwards and things. What can we as family lawyers tell me and Lisa what we should be doing better? What should we do, and us as family lawyers, as an industry, what should we be doing if we are coming across a client who either says to us, I'm being economically abused, or maybe doesn't know, and we think, hang on, there's an economic abuse here. What can we do?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, you've got domestic abuse on your website, so that's a really good start, because I always suggest to anybody that reaches out to me, because I'm very open for anybody to reach out to me that needs advice, I do suggest like family lawyers, if they need one that has an understanding of domestic abuse. It's because for me, mine didn't understand domestic abuse. It wasn't something he was really interested in. I don't think he was interested in my story at all, or what I was going through. But just a bit of empathy. I understand there has to be a professional relationship, but they could, you could signpost to different charities, or break up and divorce coaches, which are out there as well. Something that people that go through this, they always want to open up to someone and they want reassurance. Well, I wanted reassurance, and I definitely didn't get that from my family lawyer, so much so I got a second opinion on the most of the stuff that he did anyway. But yeah, like just signposting, referring them to different individuals that can actually take the time to sit and help them and speak to them to help rebuild themselves, really. And I think as well, it's really important to be given sort of updates as well. Like I had some when it was like, obviously if there's no update, that's great. If there's no letter, but I was getting my letters just sent randomly to my work email address. Like, you know, I could be in a meeting, and for me, I was really anxious every time my solicitor even, you know, emailed me, because I didn't want to see this letter. But I think, like, you know, even just like dropping a call to give an update on a case. Obviously mine was just more like going to and fro with letters, but, you know, just to give little updates. And also if there is a letter that has got very nasty content in it, which mine did, and my solicitor referred it as bullying but did nothing about it, don't just send it on. Give a call first, a heads up, I think, as well. Just we just need a bit of reassurance, I think, sometimes.
And if somebody's starting out on a new relationship, is there any kind of safeguards that potentially they could put in place to try and protect themselves a little bit from the possibility of financial and economic abuse?
Yeah, I think personally for me, from my experience, it's made me think a lot about, obviously I've got a partner now, obviously non-abusive, and you know, and I think about that now, and it's like I want to have, and I do have, my own bank account. Like before I had a joint one. Luckily when the relationship did break down in 2019, I was able to get it split before anything happened. So having my own finances, I've always been financially independent personally, but, you know, making sure you have your own finances. If you can get some of them, you know, some of them bills in your name instead of just having the other person have it, because sometimes it's a case where that person takes charge of the finances and has everything in their name. But I think put something in your name, you know, it could help with your credit scoring as well going forward in life. Different things like that, and just making sure you have some, if you can, have a little bit of savings behind you that's just yours in your own account, just in case you ever need it as well. Because at the time I'd done up all my property and I'd paid for it all, and then when I broke up the relationship, I didn't have any savings, and then I was paying this mortgage and these bills in full, and then I had £60 to my name at the end of it all, like, you know, each month. So that weren't great. But yeah, I would say to just, you know, making sure that you have your own finances and keep it separate. If there is a need for a joint bank account, just put the amount of money in there that covers the bills and the mortgage. But then again, you can still do that through, you know, separate bank accounts together. I'm just much an advocate of looking after your own money, but also obviously being fair in a relationship, 50-50, or however you want to work your relationship, but making sure that you have money for yourself just in case anything ever does happen. Because, you know, even if it's non-abusive, you could have a breakup anytime, which is horrific to go through. And then if that person's got all the finances and stuff like that, you might have nothing, and then you might not even have a bank account, and you don't know, you know, your next step. So if you have a little bit, then at least you're ready for a rainy day, or if something traumatic was to happen.
That was brilliant, Rosie.
Yeah, it was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosie, for joining us. You can find out more about the work that Rosie does supporting victims of emotional abuse by connecting with her on LinkedIn. So that's it for this episode of Stowe Talks. Thank you for listening. If you would like more information on our podcasts, head over to stowtalks.co.uk, and please rate, like, share and review where you can.